Tyler, for that introduction, and thank you, fivetrend, for making this session possible today. As you mentioned, I'm the head of analytics at Help Scout, a company that makes help desk software for companies of all sizes. And today I'm going to be talking about how we use fivetrend, Looker, and email to get more people at the company interested in and engaged with our metrics. I want to start with this quote. Most companies suck at disseminating factual knowledge. Yours probably does too. This is a quote by Tristan Handy, the founder and CEO of Fishtown Analytics. And he had this great post recently called Scaling Knowledge, where he talks about the challenge of disseminating information as an organization grows, and specifically factual knowledge. By factual knowledge, we're talking about things like how many t-shirts did we sell yesterday, or how much cash do we have left in the bank. And an organization can certainly survive without being savvy about tracking, reporting, and disseminating this type of information, but I think most of you will agree that being able to do that well is a huge competitive advantage. We've thought a lot about this at Help Scout as well, and specifically, how do we keep everybody at the company informed about how we're doing? And the solution that we came up with is a company-wide daily metrics email. At a high level, this lists 12 of our key metrics, along with how we did yesterday, how we've done month to date, how we're projecting to do for this month, and what our target is for the month. We also include a little bit of information at the bottom about our largest new customer yesterday. I'm going to talk about each of these pieces in more depth later on in the talk. We track 12 metrics, and everybody in the organization gets the same set of metrics every morning. There's a lot of ways that you can implement this, though. For example, if it doesn't make sense for your organization for everybody to receive the same set of metrics, you could tailor it by team or organization. So maybe your marketing team gets one set of metrics, your sales team another, your finance team another, etc. Also, it might not make sense for your organization for this to go out daily. You could certainly do it weekly instead. I boil the benefits of this email down to three main things. The first is that it makes it incredibly easy for your leadership and other folks who are interested in metrics to stay informed about how the organization is doing. I even had one executive tell me that the first thing he does when he wakes up in the morning is roll over and check his phone and check for this email to see how the company did yesterday. I don't know if I would recommend for everybody to be doing that, but there's going to be people in your organization like that who live and breathe these metrics. And by sending it out over email, which is a channel that they're already checking, you're going to make it very easy for them to stay informed about how the company is doing. And because this goes out over email, it's also going to reach a lot of people in your organization that otherwise might not check your BI tool regularly. I know there's a lot of people that check our email who don't use Looker or don't use it regularly or don't even have an account, but nonetheless they engage with this email because it arrives along with other emails and they check it every morning anyway. And last, this email is likely going to prompt a lot of discussion about your metrics. Help Scout is a remote company, and so we're on Slack all day, and we have a metrics channel. And people can ask questions about our metrics in this channel. And we get tons of questions about this email, ranging from simple things like, what is net expansion, to why was our expansion down yesterday, to how do we come up with our projection for the month. And because a lot of the company follows this channel, it winds up educating people about what our metrics are and why they're important. And just in general, it gets people a little more data savvy in the organization. So I want to talk a little bit about how we actually implement this email. At a high level, we use fivetrend to centralize data from MySQL, Mixpanel, Salesforce, and HubSpot in BigQuery for analysis in Looker. Fivetrend has been an amazing partner. Rather than have to build these brutal, complex ETL pipelines ourselves, we just signed up with fivetrend, and they made it possible to connect all these data sources and centralize that data in our data warehouse without a lot of hassle. And they support about 100 different connectors, and they're adding more all the time. For example, our HR team recently came to me and they said they want to get data from Lever, which is an applicant tracking platform, into Looker. And at the time, fivetrend didn't support Lever, but we reached out and it turned out they were developing one, and we're going to be testing that soon. So I highly recommend checking fivetrend out if you're looking to connect to any data sources. We ran into this issue with, let me back up a second. We've had this daily metrics email for a lot of years at Help Scout. Early on in the company's history, our leadership realized that it was important to keep not only themselves informed, but everybody in the company informed about how the company was doing. And so our CTO built this early version of this email in PHP, and it served the company well for a lot of years. We ran into this issue, though, when we got set up with Looker, where we started refining a lot of our business logic. To take one of many examples, If a company signs up for Help Scout and pays us, but then they reach out to support a few hours later and support voids that transaction, do they count as a new customer for that day or not? Well, the PHP version of the daily metrics email would say yes, they do count as a new customer. But when we started re-implementing our business logic in LookML, we decided actually we don't want them to count. And so little by little, a lot of our metrics wound up diverging. The daily metrics email would say one thing and Looker would say another. And people would notice this and they'd ask, well, is the daily metrics email correct, or is Looker correct, or is neither one correct? And needless to say, this doesn't create a lot of trust in the data when you have different data sources telling you different numbers. Now, one possible solution to this would have been to continually involve our engineers, and every time we make a change to our business logic in Looker, we have them make a change in PHP so that the two data sources would stay in sync. But this would wind up involving a lot of engineering time, and it's not too exciting of a project for them when they have a lot of other higher priority things to work on. So instead, we decided to use Looker as the single source of truth for our data. And the way that we do this is using the Looker API. Basically, we just pull our metrics in from Looker and we include it in the email, and that way the two data sources, the daily metrics email will never wind up differing from what's being reported in Looker because we're actually using the numbers that are calculated in Looker. If you've never worked with Looker's API, basically anything that you can do in the UI, you can also do using the API. There's two main ways to work with it. The first is the official SDK for Ruby, but if you can or don't want to use Ruby, you can also use a tool called Swagger to generate SDKs for other languages like Java or PHP. We wound up going with the Ruby route because it's a little bit simpler to get going. This is a simple example showing what Ruby code looks like to interact with the API. First, we require the Looker SDK, and then we give it our API credentials and tell it what API endpoint version we want to use. And then we can call a method like runLook. RunLook takes the ID of a look and what format you want that response in, and it will take care of authenticating with Looker and pulling that data in. For example, we have a look with number of new customers yesterday. It's just got a single value. So runLook in this case would return an array with a single item because it's just a single row of data with a hash that maps the metric name to the value. So to get the value, it's as simple as taking the first item in the array and then the first value in the hash. And then we can take that value and throw it into an email template and include it when we send it out to everybody in the entire company. We've learned a lot about how to actually build this email to be effective over time. Again, at a high level, this is what the email looks like. We list each of our 12 metrics along with how we did yesterday, how we've done month to date, what we're projecting to do for the month, and what our target is for the month. And we also include information about our largest new customer yesterday. For the yesterday and month to date metrics, they almost all have a one-to-one relationship with a look. For example, we have a look with a number of new customers yesterday, number of new customers month to date, another with number of new trials yesterday, another with number of new trials month to date. And we just hard code those look IDs into this Ruby script and then pull the values in that way. One thing that we've learned about doing this is because this email goes out every morning, you could include partial data from the ongoing day in the email, but we found it's just a little bit easier to reason about the metrics when we ignore that data. So the month to date metric just includes data through yesterday, and yeah, it just winds up being easier to reason about that way. For our projections, most of them are just extrapolations, meaning we look at our daily average so far this month and assume that the rest of the days in the month are going to behave the same, and then we figure out our projection that way. There's some limitations with this though. For example, if the month starts on a weekend where your metrics will tend to be lower, it'll lower your daily average for the first couple days of the month, which will lower your projection. Similarly, if the month starts on like a Monday, which might be your busiest day of the week, it will tend to raise the average for the first few days of the month, which will cause the projection to be high. But after about a week in the month, usually this will get you in the right ballpark to where you'll actually wind up. If you have the know-how though, I'd recommend making this a little more, making your metrics a little more savvy. For example, when we're projecting how much revenue we're going to make this month, that's comprised of a little bit of revenue from new customers and a lot of revenue from existing customers. Well, we know who our existing customers are. We know who hasn't churned. We know how many users they have, what plan they're on, what discounts they have. And so we can figure out for the rest of the month about what we're going to make from our existing customers. And so when we add that with what we're going to make from our new customers, we can get very close even at the beginning of the month for projecting how much revenue we're going to make. If you have the ability to do this for all of your metrics, you should certainly take that extra effort to do so. But if you just want to start small, a simple extrapolation will get you a long way. When you list this projection in the email, I'd recommend color coding it so that if it's on target or better, it's green, for example. And that way, anybody that's looking at this email can know at a glance whether that metric is on target or not for the month. For our target, we have a pretty detailed spreadsheet model where for all of these metrics, we have targets for the next 6 to 12 months, and we just hard code those targets into this email. A simple way to get started, though, is just look at your historical averages for your metrics and set those as your targets. For example, if you've averaged 100 new customers a month for the last 3 months, you could just make your target 100, or you could factor in some growth and make it 105 or 110. And that way, when people are looking at this email and they see the target next to the projection, it's easy to understand exactly how good the company is performing relative to those targets. I think it's also important to include a little bit of qualitative data in this email. For example, we include details about our largest new customer yesterday, what their name was, how many users, what plan they're on, and then a description that we get from Clearbit, which is a service that enriches information about companies and people. And I think there's a decent number of people at Help Scout who read this email primarily because they're interested in this data point, because it's often companies that they're familiar with, and we often celebrate those successes. But as a side effect of them checking the email for this, they also get exposed to the quantitative numbers, which helps them be a little more knowledgeable about how the company is doing. One other cool thing that you can do is when you list the metrics in this email, instead of just making them raw text, you can make them links to dashboards or looks in Looker. And that way, if anybody's interested in diving into the numbers more or seeing visualizations, you provide a really easy way for them to do that. And it also encourages use of Looker that way, because people don't have to go around and explore all the different spaces and dashboards that you've created to figure out how to drill into this data. So this makes it really easy for them to get the answers that they need. Every now and then there will be problems with your ETL pipeline, and you want to make sure that this email doesn't get sent out in that case, because it might wind up saying that you made no money yesterday or you had no new trials, and it'll be clear that that's not correct, but it'll make people mistrust the email if it gets sent out when that situation happens. You can mitigate this by just including a few sanity checks in your code. For example, if the data hasn't been updated in a day, then don't send out the email. And you can have it send you an alert, and then you can dive into it, and once the issue is fixed, you can manually kick it off. On the first of the month, you'll want to do things a little bit differently. Instead of including yesterday, month to date, a target, and a projection, just include what your results were for last month and what the target was. Chances are at the end of a month, a lot of your leadership especially will be sweating the numbers to see whether you come in on target or not. And if you don't provide a summary on the first, there's not going to be an easy way for them to know where you actually wound up. Also, data scientists tend not to be the best designers, and if one tries to design this email, chances are it's not going to look too good. So I'd highly recommend involving a designer from your company in this process. Just use an on-brand email template, and people will be a lot more likely to actually read this email. And last but not least, I recommend starting simple. Our email has gotten a little bit complex over time, but you don't need to start with something this complex. You can certainly just include 2 or 3 metrics, yesterday, month to date, a projection that is extrapolated, and a target that's based on historical averages. You could probably knock this out in 5 or 6 hours, and then you can iterate from there. You'll get feedback from your leadership and other people at your company about what they want to see in this email and what changes, and then you can iterate on it and make it better for your organization. The most important thing, though, is just to get something out there, and you'll get feedback, and you can go from there.